Hey, welcome everyone to the Archicad User Monthly Webinar for January 2023. This is my little puppy here named Simone. I just had to run out. My wife is going out somewhere and she ran out into the street. She's okay, obviously, but it's a little bit nerve-wracking knowing that I was due to start this presentation right at the top of the hour. So welcome to everyone. Let me know that you can hear me and see the screen, and we shall get going. You can use the GoToWebinar questions panel here. I'm just trying to make sure this opens up. Okay, Paul Whitworth. Hey, nice to see you, Paul. Um, Ian from Scotland. Hey, I just type in where you're calling in from. It's always fun. Hey, Megan. All right, good. And then for those of you who are in the Archicad coaching program, um, you can use the Slack workspace as well. So today, open Q&A. And because I sent out the notice sort of at the last minute, just 36 hours ago or something, I didn't get much in the way of response. So you can just type in a question and I'll open up your line. We can have a chat. I can show you things. If you want to send me a file, you can send it to support@bobrow.com and do that with a link, usually Dropbox or WeTransfer.com work very nicely. And you can also use Google Drive or some other cloud thing to do that. And I'm happy to open up your file, take a look. I allocate a couple hours for this for our monthly webinar, so we may be done in 20 minutes or we may take the two hours. I'm open to helping you during this time. So Laura, connecting from Germany, Nicole from Berkeley, just right across the bay. I'm in San Rafael in San Francisco Bay Area. Okay, Matt from Seattle, Paul from Salida, Colorado. Okay, so let me know if you have some questions. I know one of the questions was sent in ahead was about library management. I'm just going to see if that particular person is on the line right now. Let me bring up my support ticket. Okay, it's Ricardo. Let's see if Ricardo's on the line. Ricardo, yep, you are. Okay, let me open up your line. So Ricardo, you can click the green button to make your microphone active. I've unmuted you, so you can do that. And meanwhile, let's see, I think, yeah, you did send me the file. We'll download this and we'll take the question. So Ricardo, can you open up your microphone? Ricardo Yaton. If
Can you hear me now?
Yep, perfect.
Oh, finally. Okay. How you
Yeah,
doing? It's been a long time, Eric.
it has been. Glad you're here. So you mentioned in the file the question. I'll just put this on screen now here. That file, let's make it a little bigger. Has so many library issues, it's become painful to deal with. It's a file that was created back in Archicad 18 or so. Have a lot of hands, a lot of duplicate parts. What version of Archicad are you running right now?
24.
24, okay. So in order to help you best, I'm going to start up Archicad 24. So that way, if I am able to resolve some or all of the issues, I can send it back to you.
Right.
So you mentioned that it's got a lot of duplicate library parts. Are there
Yeah.
missing parts as well?
And does that refer to the fact that I just get the little dot when I open it?
Mm-hmm.
No, not yet, actually. We just
Okay.
it's just that the file is so overburdened, I think, with this that it just become painfully slow. Rendering just takes forever.
Mm-hmm.
And truly,
You gave me a zip. Let me go and unzip it here.
You know, truly, Eric, the question is, and I've always had this question, is that when, in my layman's understanding of this, when you embed the objects, don't they travel with the file? I mean, isn't that, don't, do they not become part of the file? So regardless of who opens it, that those
All right,
embedded,
let me clarify some things about libraries as we get this open. So let me make sure I get the file open. We'll take a look at the warning or error messages that you're seeing, and then just make sure you and everyone else are as clear as possible on what they indicate. Are they something that either you should be concerned about, or is potentially impeding work, or not?
cool.
So getting the file open. Now, as it's opening, I'll just say, what are library parts? They are doors, windows, objects, furniture, trees, etc., that are that say are available for use in your project. Generally, they're very efficient in the sense that library elements, when you place them, they're like a single thing, a single window or door, or furniture, although they can be polygon intensive, meaning, if you have a tree or some certain things that are sculptural, a lot of surfaces, they can take a lot of time to process, particularly if you have lots of trees or lots of these elements that are ornate, like sink taps would be an example
Right.
of a manufactured product that if you did a hospital with 500 rooms and you had the sink taps in there with high detail, all of a sudden Archicad bogs down. All right, so missing add-ons, direct link Archicad to Twinmotion, that shouldn't make a difference, but I
So
guess.
let me ask you, so if you have an object door one, and then you make a copy of that door one and turn it into door two because you've adjusted it, does that then become two library objects?
Okay, well, let's talk about that. Let me just get this open. It says that errors occurred during the lost operation. So right now it says that there's something might be concerning. It doesn't tell me any details. I'll just click OK to go on. It is bringing up the 3D window. Errors like this may have to do with settings of components that are set in an odd way, like maybe you pick a window with a transom and you tell it to make the transom 0 height. And it says, well, I can't make it 0 height. You have to give it at least something there. And, so there are cases where we have inappropriate or unacceptable parameters. And sometimes you have to check a box that says no transom, or sometimes you say, let me just use a different part that doesn't have that option. There can be other errors that maybe have to do with missing things that are there. Now, I'm not going to worry right now about the 3D model here. I
Yeah.
will just sort of move this around just so we get a better sense of the project. Right now, it's taking a while to regenerate. You must have this set on what would be called analytic shading. So that is under the view menu, the 3D view options, and we can see it's in this upper section of, you have 3D renders. It's trying to show things, but it's analyzing it in high detail, and we can get a similar view much faster if we put it into one of the ones below this line, which
Sure.
uses the 3D graphics card there. So I will do detailed shading, should be just fine. It'll look very similar. A little different. It has some textures, but now I can, move around instantly like we're used to. Now, in terms of the warnings, sometimes we may be able to see them in the Action Center. And the Action Center, which was introduced into recent years of Archicad, has some summaries of areas you might be concerned about. For example, libraries. And it says some libraries are missing, some library parts are missing, and it tells me that, hey, I could open the Library Manager to see some details, and there is an option right here to do that. We can also open Library Manager under the File menu, Library Manager, which obviously is a way when you don't go through the Action Center, you can do that. Now let's just look here. There's drawings. This warning here is something usually you can ignore. It just says that the drawings on the sheets haven't been updated recently. There are ones that may be out of date. And if you were to print a set, you might want to update all of them before you print. Otherwise, if you're not printing, whenever you go to each sheet, typically you can either, it automatically updates the drawings, or you can trigger an update just for the specific sheet. All of these other ones have green check marks. There's an update. That means that my Archicad itself is not fully up to date. It's Archicad 24, and I haven't used it for a while, so it's probably something released by Graphisoft. So the library is the only one really seeing in the Action Center. I'm going to go to the Library Manager here or in the main dialog and take a look. Now it says that there's an embedded library and that there's a migration library, and then there are two other libraries that are missing. Okay. Now, an LCF is a library container file, so it is a library resource. It's typically included inside a larger folder. A folder. This is a file. And for example, the object library for Archicad 24 is typically found in the Archicad folder, like Archicad 24. Now you're on a PC and it's used to looking for this in your PC's C drive. Now I'm on a Mac, and obviously our file systems are somewhat different because of the difference between Mac and Windows. If you were loading the object library using the standard Archicad Library 24 reference, it includes this plus textures. And then it actually would have said, oh, I'm going to look in the standard place. It wouldn't have been missing. Now, this isn't a big deal, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a reference to the Archicad Library 24 in my Archicad 24 folder within Graphisoft. And by the way, the dialog boxes, there's an issue with some recent versions of Archicad and the Mac OS that I'm using. These dialog boxes get wider over time. I know there's a workaround for it, but right now, that's the reason why this is so wide. I'm going to say choose. Now, I've just added the Archicad Library 24, and if I were to open it, it includes the Object Library 24 LCF. So I don't need this anymore. I will say remove it from the list. In the same way, the MEP library, if I say add, we go back to that same folder, you'll see there's an MEP library 24 folder, and here's that LCF that you were loading. But if you load the folder here, it actually, even when you send it to another person like me, it'll find it automatically. So I'm going to say, hey, let's load the folder, remove this reference here. All right, so now nothing's missing. Now I will say reload and apply, and what is that going to do? It's going to look through the references that I just gave it, and it should, if we look down here, we should have the missing library parts go away either entirely or mostly. Right now, there's a bunch of things that are missing. If we look at from object library here, because I wasn't loading your file, it says these things are missing. So I'm going to reload and apply. And so now it'll load what I've got here. Now, if I send you back this file with only that one change, you won't see any difference in your key problem, which is the duplicate parts, but you will be able to send it back and forth to me or others, and it won't be missing the main library or the MEP library. Now, you may not even be using the MEP library. For those of you who don't know, that's mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and it's a support library if you're doing duct work or pipes using the MEP tools that Graphisoft has available. Now, we can see that all of a sudden the warnings have jumped up, but the missing library parts now are only from this very old library 10. So there are duplicated things. There are more things that are duplicated because of loading, because I've now successfully loaded the main library. And this is where you are probably seeing it, duplicated parts. It's going to be a very long list. You can see it's taking a while. I can scroll through it. It's just on and on and on and on. Okay. All right. So this is where I think you were saying, hey, this is annoying. I don't even know how to approach it because it's just a very long list of, thousands, literally over 1,000 noted parts. Now, what I am a little concerned about is you have some things from Archicad Library 10 that are missing. Let's just see what they are. It's just insol fib. What is that? It's insulation fiber or fiber insulation, soft, you know, like what is it? Fiberfill there, and it's a 2D symbol. It just is the thing, the squiggly thing. So somewhere this is placed in your file, and it will just have a dot on it. But that's the only thing that's missing. And there's an equivalent in later libraries, and ideally what you do is you just find where these are and either delete them if you don't need them or replace them with current ones. But
So
here's
that
your,
would take, wait, excuse me, so that would take me going through the file to go find where it is and then delete it. I just couldn't push that, highlight that and just say delete it
unfortunately, there's no button here that says go find it
or delete it.
or delete it. No, there's nothing. So that is unfortunate, but I can find this on my computer because I have Archicad Library 10, and I can go find it and drop it in, and we can add it to the embedded library. So you were asking earlier about the embedded library, and when you have things embedded, doesn't it go with the file? Yes, the embedded library is part of the file on your disk. And you know, when someone opens the file, it'll have access to anything that's in there. Now, we aren't missing much. We're only missing one little thing, but we do have duplicates. Now, what causes duplicates? Well, if we just look at the very first one here, this is UI tree type. Okay, so this is UI stands for user interface. So it literally has to do with the interface talking to you as a user. And from my experience, this would be something related to a library part where you're opening a library part and you're looking at maybe little diagrams that explain this parameter means this, that parameter means that. So it's an explanation in the interface for something that you as a user need to go, okay, I need this to be a certain dimension, or I want to turn this off or on. So it's a supporting component of the library elements. Now, the fact that it's duplicated, for the most part, these things will not get in your way. It's basically saying I have more than one reference to it, and maybe they're different. They appear to be the same. Now, if I click this little triangle, we'll see that this is available or placed into the embedded library in 4 places. So it's actually not in the standard libraries that we loaded here. It's in the embedded library. So we could go find these and say maybe we don't need it. And you'll notice this first one says that it's Pickbox, Maple Owl, parts, do not modify. So when you see things like such and such parts, do not modify, these are supporting components that are used in the library part, something like Pickbox Maple. So what is a Pickbox? I'm guessing it is a picture of a tree in a box so that if you were to move around different parts of your view, it looks like a tree. It's basically probably, actually might be 2 crossing.
Exactly, yeah.
What do you call it? Rectangles with a picture map on it.
Yeah. Yep.
And anyway, if we look at other ones like this Quercus petrae ping here, Quercus petrae parts, and you have this Quercus petrae. Is that
That's a tree. It's another tree.
So what this is showing is that you actually have a folder in the embedded library with this name, Quercus petrae parts, and then another one that has Quercus petrae 1, 2 parts, and another one that says 1, 2, 3 parts. This indicates that you've copied this file in multiple times. And this is where we can go clean it up, and we don't have to do it one by one. We can take out folders, and when we take out folders, we may find that there are 5, 10, or even 100 parts that are duplicates that go away just because the folder has a bunch of things. So that's what I'm going to focus on.
So what do you mean when that happened because I loaded the file multiple times? How explain that to me?
Okay, so we'll take a look in the embedded library. And so in the embedded library here, so if I highlight it on the left side, then on the right side, it'll show that. Here you can see, here's Quercus petrae multiple times. And each time I click on it, you'll see what it has inside it on the right side here.
Gotcha.
Okay, so these first two are exactly the same, right? This one seems to have one more element, this free symbol. So in fact, that's the only difference between these. So I'm very confident that if I take these two, if I go to the embedded library and I take these first two and I say remove them, that it'll lower the duplicates and we won't have anything missing because we have everything there. So I'll just demonstrate that first as an example. So I'm going to hit the X here. It says you're about to remove some items from this library. Now, just calm yourself in terms of anyone who's concerned. First of all, Ricardo sent me the file. He has an original copy. I'm deleting it from a copy. Secondly, it's a library component. We can usually retrieve these from other files anyway. I'm not deleting anything from that he's placed in the project. I'm just deleting some resources that in this case are duplicates. So I'm going to say delete. Now, having done that, if I say reload and apply, we can get an updated report. Take a look at the 1053. When I reload and apply, and it takes a little while. Here it's telling me that it's thinking about it. And now it's 1045. So it removed, 8 of that. So it would take a little while, but this is basically what we're going to look for. Now, if we look in here, the names, we also see things like from Archicad Library 22, from Archicad Library 24, from Archicad Migration Libraries. Now, right now, I am loading the Archicad migration libraries. You had it set up there. So what are the migration libraries? And so this is a set of resources in whatever version of Archicad you have, a folder. And inside that are library parts from earlier versions, 23, 22, 21, 20, all the way back to, I think it's 14. And it's basically parts that were updated and that Graphisoft says, you know what, people may still be using these. There's better or newer versions in the current library, but let's just put them in this support area in case you need to load them. You won't find them missing. Now I'm going to just test this. If I say, hey, you know what, maybe you've already embedded all of the stuff or many of the things from the migration libraries into your embedded library, which is perfectly legitimate. You can say, I don't need the whole thing, I just need some of it. So I'm going to say, you know what, let's remove it from the list. This just says, don't load this. I can always go back and load it from the same place. So I'll say, remove this and reload and apply. We're going to see this 1045 go way down. Reload, because I can tell that you've already embedded a bunch of parts from the earlier, from those migration libraries. And we can see 1063 okay, it actually seems to have gone up because we now have some missing things. Okay, those are only a few favorites and from attributes. Okay, so there is an issue here when I remove that migration library that your current surfaces, so these are the things that give you the appearance in 3D of, whether it looks like wood grain or grass or things like that. These things in your environment are using all of those surfaces from the embedded, from the migration libraries. So what I'm going to do is say, all right, that didn't work quite the way I wanted. I'm going to go back, add in this migration library. Actually, I wonder if in the migration library, where is it? Archicad migration library. All right, I'm just going to load this back in, and what I will do is after I load it back in, I'm going to reload, and then I'm going to go and selectively get the textures that we're missing. So we don't need to load all of them. And I can't remember which version of Archicad they switched It might have been from 23 to 24 that they switched the surface references. In other words, the picture images that were used to represent wood grain or grass were changed dramatically. So if I go into the migration libraries here, and we look at 23.
Now, is a migration library something that comes from Archicad, or is it continuously being updated on the file as you go from, 18 to 19 to 20? Is it kind of like travel with it? I don't quite understand what the migration thing is.
So the migration libraries are provided by Graphisoft in the standard folder. When you install Archicad 24 or 26, they'll put in this folder, and it will contain components that are from previous versions that are no longer in the current library. Now, what you see is in 23 migration library, there's some objects and there's some things called zones, but in the 22, there's this surface catalog. So the surface catalog is the one that I want to retain in here, because that's when they switch from 22 to 23. They replace the surface catalog with a better one, but your file, which started earlier, is using those surfaces. So what I'm going to do is take this surface catalog and I will save it out to a folder on my computer, and then I will reload it separately from the migration libraries, and this will resolve some of the issues here. So I'll say, put it on my desktop here. Let's see, say export this, and usually goes very quickly, like within a second or something. And let me look here. So in the, I put it on the desktop. I usually put it in downloads, but where's my desktop folder? Here's desktop. All right, so here is the Surface Catalog 22, which has all of these different textures. So what I'm going to do, you're not using all of them literally, but you are using a lot of them. So I'm going to go and drag it. So I'm going to go back to the embedded library here, and then I'll literally drag this folder in. So I'm dragging the Surface Catalog that I just downloaded there. I guess, whoops. Need to drag it, I guess, on top of the embedded library here. And you can see it shows up down below there. And this has got those textures. Now, what I'm going to do now is go to the libraries in the project, remove the migration library that I had temporarily put back in, and then reload. So I've basically said, let's remove the migration support and only load the surface textures that were that are needed here. And what we'll see, we should see this number of warnings go down. Yeah, now at 931. So now we've made a dent. Obviously, still an issue. Let's just see what we have. Missing parts. So we still have that one part, the insole fib here. Now favorites, these are things from 22 that are at least in your favorites. You may or may not be placing them, but it says I can't find them. And then there are some things, just a limited number of things that come from even somewhere else. So we'd need to track these down. Otherwise you're going to get that checkerboard look in 3D if you have anything drawn with them. So we could do a little more investigation. But if we look at the duplicated parts, let's just see what else we have. And I won't be able to fix everything, but we'll just see. So door panel types here, embedded library, door with 2 side light parts here, double door 16 parts. So this particular image, which is used in a library part, is in 2 of these subfolders. If we go back to the embedded library here, we've got these parts that are being included. So what a lot of these things are, you embedded certain library components that had redundant, unnecessary things, and we, are loading them multiple times. Now I'm noticing here the MEP library 24. So there are, you know, a bunch of things here that are in this. And remember, in the libraries, I loaded the MEP library here, so we may not need, we can either take this out here, or we may say, let's take out the external one, because maybe you have, maybe you already have it in the embedded library, these components. So this is the process that we have to go through. It's, you know, back and forth as much as needed to see, you know, what things are duplicates here. So from Archicad, you know, there may be some parts in here that are duplicated with parts in there that are duplicated with parts in here. So we'd have to inspect it. Now there's 931 things. I can probably, you know, spend another 5 minutes and drop it down. Maybe it'll go down to 800, maybe it'll go down to 200. I don't know. But let's pause for a moment and just say, all right, I've made some changes. How does the file look? How does it perform? Because ultimately, does it give you any benefit to make these changes? Well, if I go to the floor plan, not sure why it's so zoomed out, but let's just zoom in on the area. And it's certainly behaving quickly. You know, I can get, you know, in and out of the project. If I go to 3D, we probably don't see anything different. Here, if we say that we have a view, let's go to a 3D view. Do you have one that's a saved 3D view?
Yeah, they're down there somewhere.
Let's go to courtyard. And it's taking a few seconds to bring up. So duplicate parts, as I mentioned briefly earlier, may or may not get in your way in terms of speed. You know, I don't know what, I'm not seeing much of your building, it looks like. Is there actually a building there?
Yeah, there is.
By the way, your audio just changed. I can't.
I'm sorry, I had the microphone above my head.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, there's a building there, but I think that view was just meant to, as if you were standing at the back window looking out. So that's why one of the reasons I've gone around and around all these workarounds is because it took so long to render that it was easier to create another view, you know, and not show the walls. So therefore I had to be standing at the window, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, all right. Now, this is taking a little while to render. Let's just see what's causing it, because duplicate library parts won't slow down this 3D process. What will slow it down are settings in the 3D views. So right now, I clicked on OK here. Oh, maybe I hadn't clicked on OK. Maybe that it was just waiting there. But this is certainly, it's moving around just fine. Let's go to a different view that's similar. House from pool 2, that's a different view. House from front gate, you know, and a gabion stairway. So these are all coming up pretty instantly. Now this one is taking a little time. Now it's clear that this view, you have a lot of vegetation showing. So that's what's slowing it down, I'm guessing, and it's also causing some errors. So while I can go on and probably optimize your library painfully, I don't think it's worth spending a lot more time during today's session on that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I just
what would be interesting? What would be interesting is to look and say, well, what's causing this to take 30 seconds to generate a view, whereas the other views just popped up. Okay, well, it's the vegetation. Now there's two types of vegetation you have here. By the way, now it's coming up very quickly as I move around. You can see all of these pictures. Whoops. So I can move around, very quickly as I'm using the mouse wheel. It's not slowing down. So these are all 2D pictures, which in general look somewhat realistic in a rendering. You don't see the black outlines there, but they look somewhat realistic and don't slow you down. Now let's look at
Now, when you say that they in a rendering, that was one of the questions. Is when I render photorealistic, yes, those things go away, but any other of the 3D views, I always have those little black boxes. Is that correct? Or
to avoid that, the only real way I know is to turn off contours in the 3D window. So contours are the outlines that help delineate the edges of surfaces. So if I go to 3D view options, right now this is in 3D renders. This is back in the analytics. So when I double clicked on Gabion Stairway, it actually went back to that. Let's just go to the detailed shading, and you see how it changed subtly, but it's actually going to be very smooth. So this Gabion Stairway, if I go to the settings here, it's remembering that the 3D style is 3D renders. That's the analytic one. I'm going to switch it to the detailed shading. Okay. And now if I double click on this, it'll go back to the earlier, well, I guess we do have an earlier orientation. I'm just going to double click on House from Pool. And here's Gabion Stairway. And you can see how it jumps virtually instantly. So one of the things that's slowing you down is that you have some or many of your saved views using the analytic method of projection. So that's under the 3D styles, and the ones that are in this upper section, like 3D renders, are using the vectorial engine. The ones that are down below, like detailed shading, are using OpenGL. So while this is available for a good reason, sometimes you do want it, in general, most of your working views should be set for one of these lower options because they use OpenGL and they come up much more quickly. So that'll...
In which case would I want to use the upper ones in the analytic or vectorial engine? What's the purpose of that?
Okay, so when you generate a working drawing, an elevation or a section, Archicad is doing an analysis and it uses the analytical engine. If you see extraneous lines, like on a surface that's supposed to be one smooth surface and you see a line on it that isn't supposed to be there, then it usually is caused by either the surfaces being slightly out of alignment or not quite being coplanar in the same plane, or that the surfaces have two different surface textures, like one is brick and the other is brick one or something, they have different names, or they might be one's white, one's gray, or, whatever, and there's a line that says here's where it changes either the plane or the material, the surface. Now, sometimes it's hard to figure that out in the elevation view. You say, I don't know what's going on here. If you bring up a 3D view using hidden line vectorial or hidden line, one of these ones here, then you can actually maneuver around, even do a marquee, do things to figure out how you clean up your elevation. So that's the main reason I use these. Occasionally I'll use it when we have a lot of surfaces that are really hard to differentiate, and it gives you a very crisp edge lines. And so I will switch to that. But the trade-off is that it always takes longer, and for any type of complex model, it may take objectionably long. In other words, it may take you 20 seconds to bring up a view instead of 2 seconds, things like that. So this is something you can manually switch between. You can, of course, I can click on this, it'll switch to it, or I can use this, I can switch in the view menu here to one of these, like here's a white model. And that's, I guess that white model you have set for, well, it's wireframe. Interesting. Why is that? Usually the the 3D styles of a white model would not be wireframe here. So we would say usually a white model would be opaque. Now, why is it? Yeah, okay, it did accept the click, so I clicked on that. So now when I go back, it'll be white and we'll see surfaces, and the next time it's used, it will be. So changing it to wireframe is sometimes interesting, but rarely the one that I would work with.
No, go ahead and leave. No, go ahead and leave it the way you have it. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So now, it's a white one. So I can switch that using the view, 3D view options, etc. here to detailed shading. I can also, when I save a view, it'll save whatever was the current setting. And you saw that just a minute ago, I went to the settings here and I manually changed it to say, oh, you know what, that shouldn't be one of the analytic ones. It should be faster.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at your big picture one, which is, hey, the file is getting cumbersome. It's not working very quickly. Probably your 3D views, many of them were set for this slow rendering style, and you didn't quite realize it. It was just getting in your way. The duplicate library parts that we were seeing it's annoying that there's a message about it, but it's probably not slowing you down. Missing library parts like the insulation fiber thing, if you say, I don't even know where the heck that is, fine, not getting in your way. But if you go, you know what, that detail that's supposed to show the roof section, I'm not seeing the insulation. Oh, there's a red dot there.
Yeah.
That's because, the insulation symbol that you were using is not visible.
Gotcha.
And given that insulation is usually seen in a section, you probably wouldn't find it on the floor plan. It would be main sections or details.
Gotcha.
All right.
Okay. Well, you know what? You sent me in the straight path, so I know what to deal with now. Thank you so much. Great, huge help.
You're welcome. So I'm going to go and just say that what have I changed? I've done a little bit of manipulation of your library loading and removed a couple of duplicates in the embedded library. And you could continue on there, but I don't necessarily think that that's going to make a big difference. Now, if this was your template and you were starting new projects based on it, I would absolutely clean it up. But if it's just a project that you're working in and your main issue was it's slow to bring up views, it was this other issue. It was
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to go save as, and taking a moment, or is it not save as? Oh, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to save it as a solo project, but I will so Bobrow. I'll just call it after Bobrow.
That's perfect. That's fine. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll send that back to you there. Let's see if there are any questions. Laura, connecting from Germany, had a question she posted 25 minutes ago about MEP tools, and so we can talk about that. Paul Adams says this was helpful for him. Okay, so good. I'm glad. The whole idea here, obviously, is answer one person's question and have other people go, I've had that issue, and it helps. So we'll take Laura's question. I'm going to look back in. All right, so in the Archicad coaching program, I don't see any other questions related to this moment in time. So let me take Laura's question, and I invite all of you who are on, we have 71 people on, to just post your questions, anything you'd like me to address in go to webinar questions area or in the Slack one. So let's see. So Laura, let me open up your line. So this is Laura Choconta. I apologize if I have your name, I'm pronouncing it wrong, but Laura, can you click on your microphone and?
Is that working then?
Yes, it is working. Good.
Awesome, thank you. You had a very good pronunciation of the last name, actually. I'm surprised.
Oh, good. Okay. So you're based in Germany and you have a question about MEP tools. So which version of Archicad are you in?
24 as well.
24 as well.
but the thing is that I'm the junior architect in the company, and we're looking at the possibilities of using Archicad to collaborate with another company that's going to help us doing the energy improvements inside the buildings that we're working on, like a little bit more, much more technical stuff that I could work with. So like solar panels installation, where the heating system could be improved and modified and so on. So we really have to collaborate in these topics, where the engineers, of course, have to do the specific drawings, but we are trying to see which options of programs could help us in this collaborative process. The issue is that I am not familiar with the MEP tool in Archicad. I saw that it was an option, and before I go through all the learning process of the specific tool, I was also wondering, in your opinion, if it's a tool that could actually work in this collaborative process, because the engineers would also have to learn a little bit of Archicad and then go learning about the tool. So it would be very time consuming, but what could the results mean for the company? Like, is it worth it?
All right, so let me, share a couple of general observations. So in general, you need, as a design, an architectural firm, to create a building that coordinates everything. So, you're coordinating the structure, the spaces, you're working, in terms of building codes, etc. We all know, all of us who are Archicad users, that the 3D tool helps to coordinate and make sure that all the drawings are consistent, etc. Now, what do you, when you have a complex building and, let's say in a commercial context or institutional hospitals or things like that, there's a lot of services that have to be coordinated. So you have a lot of complicated, HVAC, for ventilation and heating. You have, the pipe work that needs to be coordinated for both supply and drainage. You have electrical, etc. Now, each of those professions or those consultants probably has, certainly has their own preferred methods. Many of them still are working in 2D, and they'll create drawings and they'll provide drawings, and it'll be up to someone to look and make sure that the pipes are not hitting the ductwork or not exposed, when the ceiling is a certain, something different than they're thinking about. So somebody has to coordinate it. So one way that you can coordinate is you can have, I have my Archicad model, you have your Revit MEP model, and let's combine them in a virtual world where we can see how they fit together and see if anything's sticking out or bumping into each other or something like that. So if they have a tool that they're working in 3D, then rather than use Archicad's MEP tools, you would import their model into your environment using IFC. So IFC is a file format that allows intelligent tools like Archicad and Revit and other dedicated specialty tools to communicate not only the geometry, like where things are, but what they are. Like, this is a duct that's a certain size, or this is a electrical element that has a certain rating. So there's information. So this is your building information model, and the IFC stands for Industry Foundation Classes, which we're in the building industry, and these are fundamental categories of, this is structural walls, and this is roofs, and this is this is services, etc. All that being said, if they have a 3D tool that they're working in, best to just combine, coordinate, look for clashes, report on issues, then be able to look at it together and resolve it. Now, on the other hand, if they do 2D drawings and they don't have a 3D tool, maybe they want to learn a 3D tool, and maybe it could be Archicad. So there'll be some firms that will say, this looks like the wave of the future, or, we're working with a number of Archicad firms, or we work on a lot of projects with your firm, and so we will invest the time and, the money potentially to buy a license to use Archicad. That's one possibility. Another possibility is you take their 2D stuff and you model it using the MEP tools wherever that's appropriate. So you can relatively quickly create a version of their 2D stuff in 3D and then look and say, oh my God, they're running this over here and they're not taking into account the ceiling is different or that we have, a beam there or, whatever. So you then model it and say, oh, there's a problem here or there, or can we move things? Can we do something to optimize there? So now it's up to you. And of course, you supply back 3D views, you supply back 2D drawings that are your version of their 2D, and you coordinate. Now, so that was sort of general things for workflow. Either we take their 3D model into ours, or we model their 2D stuff in Archicad, or they do it, and we can see issues. So you mentioned solar, is that right? Laura, you're muted.
Yes, solar panels, heating systems as well, renovation of all the, because that's kind of the purpose of what the company was created, actual, like update all the energy conservation systems in the building. Okay. So there are different aspects.
All right, so now solar panels, I'm not an expert on this at all, but what I think of is that there are these discrete objects that are bolted on, attached to the roof or wherever they're placed. And you have to make sure, well, that they're laid out, in conjunction with your design, that they're not floating in space, that they're not, that their elevation and position makes sense. They're probably pretty light, so you don't have to worry about structure in many cases, but you certainly have to have some relationship to the structure. Maybe there's some things about electrical supply lines and where they're going to be buried or put into the walls, etc. If it's just solar panels, for example, you may find that there are just objects in the library, not the MEP library, but just the Archicad library, that represent them well enough, because they're sort of in the simplistic thing. They're just rectangles on a certain angle with some sort of support framework, right? MEP tools in Archicad are designed for running systems. So running the piping or the ductwork through the building and possibly changing gauge. It's this size supply here, and then it narrows, and we have diffusers, we have termination places in these different locations that we need to coordinate. So MEP is more for systems rather than just putting a bunch of solar panels. So within the library right now, if I go here, even in Ricardo's thing, if I go to the object tool and I do a search for solar, it says it's searching. So here are a few things that exist. Now, I don't think any of them are necessarily in the MEP library, but if I click on this and I look in 3D, we can see that there are different ones here, panels, so these are things that are in the standard libraries that you can install and place. So they're not using the MEP systems. They're just things that you drop in and you say, oh, we'll need 10 of those, or they've specified so many of these panels. So that's what I would start with for sure. If they don't have a 3D model, is just use those things. Now, do you have ventilation, ducting, or other systems things that that you need to coordinate with?
Yes, exactly. So I started doing exactly what you said, trying to implement the objects into the model. But as we go more specific, I was trying to push my limits of Archicad knowing. So that's why it's very helpful now what you are telling me about learning the MEP or coordinating with them in different ways.
Okay.
But yes, so, ventilations, we have cable systems for telephone, internet, and so on.
So in terms of cable systems, I'm not an expert on this. My impression is that in many cases, they do their 2D drawings. They're just coordinating, circuit capacity. We don't want to have too much load on, this circuit or whatever. We want to make sure we have to have so many cables in a tray, to be able to supply these different zones or rooms, et cetera. And they can do that all in 2D, because it's basically just an exercise of numbers and paths, right? There is some 3D, these are 3D elements and they will be buried in the wall or somehow exist in space. My impression is it's not as hard to coordinate that as ductwork, which, can be, rather large, and other structural things, that can bump into each other. So, with the cables, they can be routed around things, certainly more easily than rigid things like ductwork. I don't know what benefit you'd have. Obviously, you want to be able to bring in their 2D information to be able to see it in conjunction with the as-built or the design drawings. So that would be a different type of exercise. But does it need to be 3D? Is it really, just the trade people will interpret it and they'll know how to lay it into the ceiling or run it up the wall?
Yeah, well, it's most interesting to have the 3D because vision in the future is to have this information also available for the people renting the different parts of the building, so that they also know, okay, this is where I can connect our computers, this is where the telephone will go, and so on, and that they also have kind of control of their consumption. So this is what we are projecting towards.
Certainly learning the basics of the MEP tools is not hard, and I could teach anyone the basics, in a couple hours, for just essentially how do you start running some ductwork and how do you, make it turn a corner and change gauge as you do that and things like that. Maybe 2 hours is an exaggeration. Maybe it'll take a day to get familiar. But this is different than being an expert at using it or being in a position to even analyze that it's really exactly right. But the basics, if you're an Archicad user and you know how to draw walls and connect them together and know how to, choose things and change the settings, it's pretty straightforward. There are a couple of differences in the methodology. You sort of are clicking a series of points to create a bunch of elements, and Archicad has some rules for how it connects things. You have some systems settings, like we're going to make the warm air stuff this color, we're going to make the cold air, that color, we're going to make the drains, or the cable trays another color. There are some settings that relate to systems that you don't have in just what are the exterior walls. Well, that's a little different. They're discrete elements rather than systems. But you could play around with it. It sounds like, from what you're saying, it would be worth spending a little time just to get familiar with those tools. I could be, available on a training basis, but you may find all you need is to go through some of the Graphisoft, video tutorials. They may be enough to get you going. MEP used to be an add-on to Archicad. It used to be something you paid for, but at a certain point, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, they just made it part of the base product. So I think in 24, you probably have that.
Yeah, all right, thank you so much. I also have some additional questions in case there's no queue.
Well, there are a few people who've typed some things in, so I'll leave your line open, and let me just say hello to a couple other people who've typed in. So Joseph Panisi says, oh, so you're in San Rafael, so you're a neighbor. Okay, so we can talk about that and perhaps have coffee together. And your wife is an interior designer wanting to start using Archicad. Okay, so Joe, let's talk. Just drop me a line, support@bobrow.com, and we can meet at Pete's or something like that, have a chat. All right, Hussein says he would suggest for Laura to search for a local product because the German market and regulations are usually different and strict with a lot of formalities than other areas. Okay, so now Graphisoft does provide, these tools localized, so it's very possible that the MEP tools within Archicad are compliant with the German standards. I don't know, but that's some insights there. Now let me just ask Hussein. I'll see if I can open up his line and ask. Let's see here. So Hussein Mohammed, welcome. Your line is opened up. If you just click on the microphone icon, we may be able to have a chat. Okay, I'm not seeing any action there. So I'll leave that open, Hussein, if you are able to locate your microphone or locate the GoToWebinar control panel and click on the microphone icon, you'll be able to be heard. All right. Richard White says the conflict analysis is worth noting in reference to structure and MEP. So I'm going to just open up Richard's line here. If he has, so Richard, your line is open. So
is that good?
Yeah, now I can hear you. So where are you calling in from, Richard?
Near Ottawa, Ontario.
Oh, okay. I lived in Toronto for 18 years, so I know the area in general terms. So Richard, have you worked with the structure and MEP and clash detection?
I have. Typically, I work with smaller projects, and so the engineers that I work with are small shops as well, and they to date are doing stuff in 2D. And so, I mean, your analysis of all the options earlier for Laura was very good. And I'm doing the third one, which is using their 2D information and putting it into, using MEP to turn it into a 3D thing. Sometimes the ductwork in particular is exposed, and so it ends up being an architectural element as well. But that conflict management is useful if, on sort of moderate sized buildings, you kind of, as thoroughly as you look in 3D, that automatic detection is interesting.
Right. So, it's possible I could open up a file and just play around with MEP routing and structure and just look at the clash detection. It's not something I have had a chance to do for a while, and so I will probably stumble around, but if we run out of questions, it might be fun to just do a little exploration of running some ductwork, putting some beams in, asking Archicad to to do some clash detection. So you've done that, Richard. You could guide me through that process?
Last time I did it was maybe 6 or 8 months ago.
Okay, so you could kibitz me as the old, I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but you could tell me, oh, Eric, you forgot to click this button. So, all right, maybe we'll do that. Let's see what other questions come up. So I don't see any other things typed in. So let's go back to Laura. You said you had another question. And so, of course, all of you are on the line, and we still have 67 on there. Feel free to type in comments or questions, and I'll be able to address them. So Laura, your line should still be unlocked.
Yes, thank you.
So what other questions can I help you with?
On this same line of trying to coordinate, it's not that the buildings are very complex, but we have, for example, different users in one project, and each project can be also different buildings close together. So I'm also trying to organize the layers, sections, views, floors, and I am getting sometimes a little overwhelmed on how to organize them, because I am not sure, for example, each building, let's call it, should be a whole series of layers for itself, or I don't know, from your experience, how you have managed it before, or have you seen that people manage it?
Okay, so you're getting overwhelmed with the complexity of your project. Tell me a little bit about what type of projects. Are these commercial? What sort of?
Yeah, so for example, we have one mainly housing project that it's composed of 4 different buildings. One is the main housing. The second one is a kindergarten and music shops. Then there is another one on the side that it's a printing company that is renting the place there. And so on this same area, I have, and maybe that was not my mistake, that I was modeling all buildings because they are close together. And then I could kind of relate, the drainage where all of it goes. But then when I have to make the section, then I have like a list of 1,000 sections, and then I don't know if it makes sense to have the projects divided, or
All right. So
how to make it.
So let me talk about multi-building projects and make, again, some general observations. If you supplied me your file, I'd be happy to look at it. Even if you want to send it to me while we're talking, you can send it to support@bobrow.com as a link, like with Dropbox, or WeTransfer.com can handle pretty large files at no charge. So I'll leave that up to you. If you tell me in a few minutes, hey, I sent you the file, I'll open it. But let's just talk in general terms about multi-building projects. Okay, so if the buildings are relatively straightforward, relatively compatible in terms of floor-to-floor heights, relatively compatible in terms of the site not being sloped significantly, then it makes perfect sense in many cases just to have one file that has, in this case you said 4 buildings all there. Now you mentioned you have 100 sections or whatever, so you need to, if you were doing it that way, you'd need to just have a naming convention, so that it wouldn't be section A, B, C, D. It would be building 1 section A, building 1 section B, building 1 section C, things like that, or abbreviations like B1 S1, B1 S2. So you just have to be very consistent or develop something that's just at a glance. First of all, it's easy to tell what this is. It's B1, so it's for the building 1. You may also, it does group in Archicad's project map. So let me just show in the project map here. And by the way, okay, what is going on here? Just need to wake this up. All right, in the project map, where we see the different groups of stories, sections, elevations, interior elevations, etc., the organizational structure is fixed in the sense that all Archicad projects will have stories, sections, elevations, etc. Whereas in the view map, you can have all sorts of different things. You can create folders and organizational groupings that suit your needs. Now, when we're talking about sections here, and I don't know what. Okay, so here we've got. I wouldn't say it's a mess, but it's a little bit confusing. We have sections that are labeled AA, CC, DD, so they're double letter here. We have ones that say SS01, SS02. Now that's mainly confusing because I don't know what SS stands for. Maybe it's a particular building, and so therefore these are sections 1 through 9 of that building, and VR viewer ones. So these, I don't know what that is, but what you'll see is that it's alphabetical and that the first few letters are used to group it. Now, in fact, when I click on this, it says AA here, but you can use the ID, and I'll just put in a number 1 here, and what we'll see is this now has a 1, and if I put in a 5 or something like that, now these are in the order based on this first letter. Now, if I go down to the next one, the DD, and I put it as number 2, it's going to reorder this on screen, you see how it jumped up here. So you can use the code to sort, and within the same number, if we were to put this as a 5 here, then it will say, oh, 5cc is before 5dd. So it's alphanumeric, but you have a code first. So part of avoiding overwhelm is just having a good system that sorts and groups things together, and that you can easily see their names. Now, in a larger project, or in a multi-building project, some of the criteria which I might consider placing buildings in separate files would be if the story-to-story heights are significantly different. Sometimes it's hard to manage, in your sections, you want to have a line indicating this is the second floor, the third floor, the fourth floor, or whatever. And if they're not the same between those buildings, then you sort of have to turn those lines off in the sections and manually draw them. Not necessarily a big deal, but it can be a convenience to just have each building in its own file, where when you draw a section, it knows what each story is. Secondly, if the stories or if the site is sloped, and these things are at very different positions on the site, then any section cut through, or actually any view, you may have what is the ground floor on one building is actually below the entire building of another one, that is sort of higher up on the site. And so then there are questions about, are you using symbolic representation of the walls and other elements, where it says, if I put it on the ground floor, draw it the way it is. Don't try to cut through it at a certain height. Just give me the wall and the windows and doors in a symbolic way. Sometimes that's perfectly fine, and other times you may find that you have complex profiles and you want to cut through windows, doors, or walls and show it at a specific height. So in cases of complex profile representation, in cases of slope sites, or building or things where the story-to-story heights are radically different, then I would consider having each building in a separate file. Now, if you put each building in a separate file, and I'll just call them ABC for 3 different files, you can then get working drawings out of each one. You can say, here's my plans, here's my sections, elevations, whatever on those sheets. You can number the sheets to fit into a larger coordinated submission, so you can change the identifiers of the sheet numbers to coordinate. But another way that you can do it is you can have the views from the plan, sections, elevations from building A imported and placed onto sheets on a site file. So that would be hot linked modeling, as well as referenced drawings in the drawing manager. So I could go into it in more detail, but basically there are 2 main approaches. Is it relatively flat, relatively consistent buildings? Maybe you just want to keep it all in one file because it's just simpler. But if you have any of these complications, then you put them in separate files and you bring in the 3D using hot link modules, and you bring in the 2D drawings, if you want to, into one layout book using the drawing manager, where you say, hey, I'd like to place on this sheet this drawing from this other file, and it will happily grab it from the other file and place it. So I just went on for 10 minutes giving some general comments. Do you have questions? Did you decide you wanted to send me a file?
It's unfortunately a little bit late here, and I'm not in the office, so I don't have the files right now. But if it's possible to reach back to you and take a look at the files together, then maybe I can do that in another occasion.
Okay. So
Thank you.
in terms of doing some feedback, looking at the file, helping you, I offer these Archicad user webinars. Once a month I aim to have some presentation. Every few months I do a coaching clinic like this, and I don't charge anything. If you'd like to get my help periodically, I do have the Archicad coaching program, which is very economical. You can pay monthly, so you can just join for a month or join for a year, things like that. So if you go to archicadtraining.com/coaching, then you can sign up for that. And then every week on Thursdays, I do it. Now, it is late for you in Germany, but you know, it starts at 1 o'clock US time, so it would be probably 10 o'clock at night for you. So there is that consideration, but that would be the way to do it. Now, on the other hand, if your firm is willing to pay for consulting and say, you know what, you've got an expert here, this guy Bobrow is pretty good, or I've heard good things, or you just say you want to work with me, and they say, yeah, we can allocate a budget, then I can work with you just one-on-one, you know, on a consulting basis. And you know, I don't have a lot of time for that, but I do that for Archicad clients periodically. So those are two options for you, Laura.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. So did my explanation of the multi-building options at least give you some, you know, some ideas?
Yes, absolutely. So there will be projects that I definitely have to separate, and there are some others that I just have to start, yeah, organizing properly, categorizing.
All right.
I have one last question though.
Yeah. Let's
So
see.
just let me know if it's possible.
Before we, well, so let's just see. Rich Matthews, hey, Rich posted something. He's from Australia. And he says, I've never fully grasped how to effectively use reference levels so that I don't have a terrain mesh that's 600 meters high. For example, I use SEO to slice off most of the bottom, but I'm sure there's a better way. Have we time to cover this? Absolutely, Rich. So Laura, if you can stay on the line, I'll help Rich with this question, and then I may be able to have a few minutes to help you with the last one. Rich, let me open up your line. Rich, your line is open. So Richard Matthews, you posted that 8 minutes ago, so I imagine you're still around. Just need to locate where your microphone control is. Well, I hope you're able to do that. Oh, and Leon from New Zealand says, do you mind to talk briefly about hardware for Archicad? All right, so I'm waiting for Rich Matthews to find the microphone or to return to his desk and say hello. But let's talk. Oh, he says he's trying. So, so I don't know what, if you want to tell me, Rich, what your issue is because basically you just need to bring up the GoToWebinar control panel, and you may have to switch to the GoToWebinar app and then bring that window to the front. Or if you're in the browser, if you're attending through the browser, I'm not quite sure, but there would be probably some controls that you can turn off and on, you know, in terms of getting access to turning on the mic. Let me just see if I send you a message. Let's see. No, I can't see a way to send you a message like, hey, click here to turn on your mic. So you're clicking on the mic, but so you may have to, oh, there's two of you. Oh, okay. That's the problem. Rich, you're logged in twice and I had opened up your, you know, the one of them. So try it now. Well, we'll see. Okay, now I see there's only one of you. You are officially unmuted, so you can click. Rich? I see the green light is on. Try talking. Okay, well, we made progress because you did activate the mic, but now you may have to choose which piece of hardware it is under your audio settings. Oh, so close, Rich. You've got the green light, but I'm still not hearing you. All right, let me talk to Leon for a minute and see if Rich, you are able to figure that out. And then we can come back to you and then possibly to Laura. So Leon, your line is open. It was open and then you must have clicked on it to turn it off. Try clicking again. It's green. Well, this is a little frustrating. I know that my speaker is, I was listening to Laura and who else? Ricardo. So I know I'm got that turned on. All right. Well, Leon, your line is open. If you can figure out, just get it. Click on the microphone icon. It was green a minute ago, and then try talking. See whether it's green. But somehow not hearing anything. Okay, so if you can just type in, you said talk briefly about hardware for Archicad. So there is a page for Archicad system requirements that you can do a Google search for, just say Archicad system requirements, and that'll give you some basic information depending upon what version of Archicad. Of course, it runs on Mac and Windows. Generally, they support the current operating system and up to at least one version back. So, if you have an older computer, it may not be officially supported, or an older operating system. And vice versa, if you have a new computer and you're trying to run an older version of Archicad, it may or may not run perfectly. Now, in terms of hardware itself, Mac and Windows, both good solutions. I prefer Mac. Generally, any modern computer will do pretty well. I always would prioritize getting more RAM, some more active memory, so that you can handle larger projects that way. These days, there's some benefit from having more processors. So, generally, if it's four core, better than 2 core, and 8 core would be better than 4. But there's always a point of diminishing returns where you're paying an arm and a leg for something that's 16 core, and it really isn't much different than 8 core, but you're paying $2,000 more for something. Solid state drive, absolutely. So that SSD. I think most computers these days probably are using that. Graphics card, generally more capable graphics card is worth it. Again, don't go overboard or don't spend a ton of money on the highest level. At least that's my general advice is, you get diminishing returns. So those are just some general comments since I don't have any specific things for you. All right, so Leanne says, I've touched what you wondered about. Okay, so, if we just said that there's a spectrum of hardware and things that you're trying to figure out, I would go, above the 50%, of the product line, like an Apple or Windows. I would go more towards the 60 to 80% range. Don't go way overboard, but don't skimp. And my personal preference would be to make sure you have plenty of RAM there. And then in terms of your drive, I like having a lot of space so I don't have to worry about running out of space on the drive, but you can be a little bit more parsimonious, maybe is the right word, about that, because you can always take some of your files off and put them on an external device. So you don't necessarily have to have a 32 terabyte solid state drive, to have everything for the rest of your life. You can have a 2 terabyte or something, or 4 terabyte. Anyway, so that's some general comments. Okay, so Dave Olafs, hey, you say thanks for the hardware insight. Your Slack is not current with the Mac operating system, which is a major issue with Archicad, your Slack. So I don't know why Slack has something to do with an issue with Archicad, but what OS are you running? I don't know. Is your OS out of date? That would be a major issue with current Archicad. Let me just see if I can open up your line, Dave. So Dave, your line is open.
I can hear you. Thank you.
Hey, at least we got, we know the audio works there. So what do you mean your Slack is not current with Mac?
Well, I probably should have added a few more words. In trying to connect to Slack today, I found out that my Macintosh operating system does not handle the current level of Slack. So when I went to copy it, well, I couldn't even get into Slack. They wouldn't let me in. And which leads me to comment about Archicad. I cannot upgrade Archicad because my operating system cannot handle. So I'm still running on, I think, 23, whereas we're at 26 now.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I'm looking at buying a new computer to accommodate that, but to upgrade to the new operating system is not a big deal, but it is a major cost on my part to upgrade Archicad accordingly.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's obviously a lot of things in life that you need money for, and one of the things you just have to figure out is what's a reasonable budget for keeping up to date with your hardware and software. I think if you're active in practice and have clients who are paying you money to do your work, I think I would prioritize having a machine that isn't a roadblock, that isn't preventing you from getting your work done, and a version of the operating system and your primary software. If Archicad is something that you spend a third or half of your workday in front of, then it's very well worth having the best version.
No, I agree totally. I just foresight was not with me on this one.
Right. Okay. Well, anyway, I wish you the best in terms of figuring it out. But in terms of Slack, you mentioned you can't get the latest version of Slack. So Slack is the discussion tool that we use in the Archicad coaching program, and a lot of companies around the world use Slack for discussion and chat and messaging. It does have a separate app that you can use on your phone or your tablet or your computer, but it also runs inside a web browser window. So you probably can just run it in Chrome and get access to, if you're talking about the Archicad.
Well, it only runs on OS 10.14 right now.
That may be the case with the Slack app, but it's not the case with, you can run it in a browser.
Yeah, or I could probably pull up my iPad. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, if you go to slack.com and you just say, hey, I want to sign in to this particular workspace, you can do that right in the browser. So that may at least relieve one issue. All right, so Leon said that I addressed some of the things you were wondering about. Rich Matthews, Rich, have you had any success there? Let's see, I'm going to unmute you again somehow. Rich, you got a green light, but I'm not hearing you. Okay, so let's, I said he restarted GoToWebinar so you could try again. Well, your line is open. Okay, and Leon, last question, will a one-on-one session be possible sometime? Happy to pay for it. Yes, just email me, Leon, support@bobrow.com, and we can make arrangements. I definitely enjoy working one-on-one with Archicad users. Don't do it a lot because I have so many other things I'm working on, but definitely find some time to help you. Okay, support@bobrow.com. All right, so Rich Matthews, I know you're there. It seems like you can't talk to me, but let's just talk a little bit about your question. You said, hey, I don't understand reference levels, and when I create a terrain model, it's usually high because the site is not at sea level or the AHD, Australian height datum. So let's just look at a simple project. I'm going to just draw a box of walls here. All right, so there's a little box. Go to 3D, and we just have this box. Okay, let me put a base on it. I'll just do it right here in 3D. Okay, so that's done with a slab tool, so it's not terrain. Now, when I do the terrain model here, and I say, this is covering a certain area, initially it starts out with a blue line at a certain reference height. This is right now 0 for this story, so it's actually the same height as the slab, and it's the height of the base of the walls. And of course, with terrain models, I can say, hey, this point here is actually, up in the air. Let's see. Change the Z height here. I can take it and have it sloped, and now, of course, this is cutting into the building just a little bit there, but that, that's the very beginnings of a terrain model. Now, what if if we have the building up at a certain number of feet, and I think you said something like 600 meters or whatever. Let me just see what your comment was. Reference levels, yeah, 600 meters. All right, so 600 meters, what is that? Roughly 2,000 feet. So you have terrain at 2,000 feet or 600 meters above sea level or the height datum. In Australia, I always think of Australia as being sort of flat, but I guess you must have some interesting terrain. I just have never, put it in my head. All right, so if I wanted this to be at 600 feet, let's go to the story settings. And we can see right now the ground floor, first floor is what we call it here. You would call this the ground floor, is right now at 0. What is it? It's 0 relative to what? Well, it's relative to the project 0. Now, the project 0 is an arbitrary point in space that everything relates to. So you can't move project 0. Project 0 is the reference. But you can say, hey, my first floor is a certain offset from that. Now, what is project 0 reference other than it just being a point to talk about? Well, the project 0 could be the top of finished floor on your ground floor. It could be the height of the street or, the walkway or right outside, where the grade is outside your building. It could be some other reference point, but definitely your project 0 does not make sense to make it sea level or the AHD, the Australian height datum, if your building is not right at, on the coast and next to the water. Why? Because you want it to relate to the building in some close proximity. So if you, and I imagine you do this, you probably made this 0 for the ground floor way up in the air, 600 meters. Now what I'm going to do is, I can't tell it to be up at 600 meters, 600 feet, 2,000 feet or whatever, because it'll say, I can't take it above the next story, which is 10 feet. But what I could do, just to maybe imitate what I think you're doing, Rich, is say, let's just take this up. I'll just make it 600 here. Now, when I put this number in here, it says, oh, then the next floor up is 600. This is 610, 620 there. Now I can go here and say, well, actually, it's up at 590 here. And now it says, all right, this is 590, and it's 10 feet, etc. Now, when I do this and I say, okay, what's going to happen is I'm looking across at the 0 level, and all of a sudden this building is going to go way up in the sky. It disappears, right? I'll zoom out until I see it again. And you can see here, I see it. Now, you notice this little XYZ? That's at the project 0. And here's my building now raised up. Now, in your terrain, and I imagine this is what you had, if I go here, if I say take the terrain And let me just make it non-rectangular. Let me just give it a little bit more definition here. Okay. All right. So maybe we say that actually, when you created this, maybe you put it on a different story. You might have done that. But instead of it being the height of the project, well, let's see, what are we doing here? This is to the home story. We say that this is to sea level. Yours would be AHD for in Australia. This says that it's 800 feet. Oh, that's interesting. I thought I did it as 600. But let's see, what you probably have is at the bottom might be at the 0 at the sea level or AHD. Now I'm just going to do that. Now let's look in 3D what I just did. So this is probably what you have. You have the interesting. So this is up here. So this is bottom and sea level here. Okay. Not quite sure the difference here, but basically this is what I imagine you're confronting, is that this is based on a project 0. If I open it up here, it's based on to sea level. The top of it is at some point, and the bottom, let's just see, so this, okay, it's on this story here, but it's the blue line is now 800. I thought I did this for 600. There and 600. Well, let's go. Okay, so no, that's okay. I must have done something with this story structure there. Okay, but at least now I've got this here. So this is what you're doing. You do a solid element operation. So you basically create an element like a slab that's sort of at some convenient height, and you say cut off the bottom of the this to be what do you call it? The right, yeah, so that it's not absurdly tall. So I'll just demonstrate that because I'm sure some of you will recognize it. I'll just go to the slab tool. I'm hearing someone sound. Rich?
Yeah, I'm on now.
Hey, hooray, good. Okay, so let me just do another slab here, just as an example. I'm just going to do another slab outside of this area. We'll go to 3D, and that other slab, I'll take it down. So I'm just going to drag it. So I'll say drag it vertically. Well, actually, I don't want both of them. I only want the slab. I want the slab. So I'll just drag it down, a little bit. So now it's below the top here. And what you're, when you talk about SEO, solid element operations, we're going to go to the design menu, solid element operations, say that this mesh, which is super tall, is the target. The slab is the operator, and we're going to subtract out where they meet and everything below, and we'll cut it off. So now you have something that looks pretty good, and I can hide this element. I can put it on a layer that I hide, or I can make it exactly the same outline as the terrain. So that's what you're doing, right? Rich? Mr. Matthews, calling Mr. Matthews. We had you. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. All right, Rich just wrote correct, but I don't know why I can't hear you. Okay.
I think I might be having trouble with my camera microphone. I can only assume that because it was working. It's working now, I presume.
I can hear you now, so that's good.
Yeah.
All right, so is this correct? This is what you're doing.
That's exactly right. So then you can see just that chunk of terrain and the building in sections elevation.
All right, so the proper way to do this, and I'm just going to go back a couple of steps here, and just get this. I think, have I done this? Yeah, so now here we have the building up at, well, I've made the terrain, the terrain right now is set to be at a certain height relative to relative to the sea level, or AHD. And so I can make the bottom of this. Let's just, if I can zoom in. Come on, whoops. So if I take this, I can usually go down here and even in 3D say I want to take the bottom down to some convenient point here. So I can give myself a platform of whatever thickness I want. Now, it thinks of itself, if I were to do any elevation settings, if I use the measurement tool, you can see that it says the Z coordinate is 590, and this one is, 602, the Z coordinate. So this is the elevation that I was aiming for. The building here is 600, for the top of that wall that we have there. Because I said 590 and then 600, that's right. Okay, now I've got something that's a little bit awkward, and that is that when I go to the story settings, if I go to the story settings, this story settings, it says that it's 590 off of project 0. This will cause some issues in relationship to the fact that, for example, if I zoom out, there is this 0 point that will show up in some views. There are some things that are going to say, hey, you're way away from the origin point. There can be issues. So I'm going to give you a better way to approach this. And
just to go back a step, Eric, when I normally go into the project, the first thing I do is look at the survey and say, okay, my ground floor slab, for instance, is likely to be at 590, for instance, right? So I'd set up I set up actually a 0 story that's the AHD, and then I set up another terrain level, and I go to whatever. I might have some foundations level below the ground floor level, but the ground floor level is what I set. Then I go in and I draw my terrain, except that it seems that you can't draw a terrain that doesn't start from 0, and that's always been the problem. I thought that you should be able to set the bottom,
right,
but you don't.
Let me just create a new one. Let me just create a new one, and we'll just do the right way, or let's say a way that's going to be easier. And there's one step that you're missing, so now we'll just zoom in on that one step.
One of the things you did, which I didn't think I've ever realized you could do, is use the pet palette to actually stretch, just like a wall, the terrain up and down. So I wouldn't have to use the SEO then, would I?
That is true. So let me just do. Okay, so I have a similar little setup here. Right now, if I were to measure this is at Z coordinate 0. All right. Here. Okay. Now I want this to be at let's say 590. Okay. The proper way to do this is to go to the options menu. Maybe we have to get out of the measurement tool, go to the options menu, project preferences, and set the location of your building. Now the location involves where it is on the earth. You can ignore that, or you can put it in. It really is only needed for sun study calculations or coordination with Google Earth, where you're saying, I want to show this in a 3D model of the earth in its proper location. But what we absolutely will benefit from is setting the altitude. And here, it's 214. I don't know where this came from, but I think this is, I said, give me a new file, and this is what Graphisoft's default is. Rather odd number there. But let's just say it's 590. Okay. All right. So 590 feet or meters, whatever.
But that does say sea level, which seems a bit odd. Is that it's going to say to sea level, I presume.
Yes, to sea level.
Yeah.
It's the altitude in relationship to sea level. That's what it is. Okay. All right. So I'm setting it at 590. Now I'll say, okay, I don't see any change here. It's still going to say, if I measure this, that this is 0, or 10 feet above, whatever. Okay. But let's look at a few things in relationship to our terrain mesh. And then let me do a level dimension tool, and I'll just click here, and it says it's a 0, right? Okay. Now, this terrain mesh, if I said, you know what, this is 590, but this is going to be 595, and I say, let me change the height of it.
Yep.
Okay, the mesh point height, it says, are we talking about how high this point is relative to where I put my blue line, my reference plane, or am I talking about it in relationship to sea level or AHD? So I
Yep.
say, change it to sea level. It says, oh, well, right now you're at 590. So I put in 595, okay? And then, you know, maybe I would go into this point and I say it's going to be lower relative to sea level. It's 588 or something like that. Okay, so you can do that for all your contour lines as well as your outline. Just set
Yep.
where they are. Now, if I go to 3D, you'll see it slightly changed. You know, got a little higher on one side and a little lower on the other. And the reference points are in relationship to sea level or AHD. Now, this says, oh, you know, it moved a little bit because, you know, it just accommodated the rest of the thing,
Right.
but it's still in relationship to the project 0, not sea level. Now, if I select this text here, I can go and say, you know what, I don't want this to relate to project 0. I want it to relate. Now, this is new in version 26, or maybe they put it in 25, where you have multi-line stuff. It used to be switch from measured value to custom value. Now it says multi-line, and with multi-line, it has some options here. You can actually do, you know, have multiple lines, and you can say different data. Now I'll say here is this value is to project 0 value, and I'll just put in parentheses to project 0. And then I'll hit the enter key, and you can see this funny paragraph symbol.
Yes.
And then I can say I'd like to put in what the top to sea level or AHD, and it says and we should, it says to top to alt value or altitude value, and I'll say to sea level. And it's just being a little slow in terms of updating right now, but the text. But normally you wouldn't put to sea level, you would just have the number that you wanted there, right?
Yep.
So I can go and say, you know what, I don't really care what it is to project 0. That does relate to maybe the finished floor, but really all I want is the this number here, and I don't need to have the word to sea level. It's just going to be like this. Maybe take out the line there. All right, so that's now the elevation. Now, in previous versions of Archicad, you had to select, if you wanted to make this a standard, you basically had to place your elevation points wherever you want, and then go in and select all of them and change them all after the fact. But we can now eyedrop this. I think we can eyedrop this, and let's just see if, yeah, now you can see it's 588. It retains the value. If I go up to here, it's 594.
Sure.
So it's they improved this radically in version 25 or 26 with the multi-line, because you can now have a favorite that says, you know, what do you want measuring to? And remember, when I selected this, it was getting some value related to the project 0 or the sea level. And you can also have reference levels. So reference levels would typically be, you know, some geodetic mark, you know, or something like the street or some other neighboring building, or, you know, it's, you can choose other levels that you want to coordinate with.
Okay.
There, and interesting reference levels name. Oh, because this actually, it's, you know, you can put in the word, instead of having to type in sea level, you can
Yep.
put that in there. So anyway, the bottom line is you need to set the location, property location, so that the project zero is at some useful level.
Yes.
If you make it the finished floor level, then what is the elevation of the finished floor? If it's, some other thing like the grade outside the front door, make that the zero, but tell it where the altitude is in relationship to your reference point. And then separately, as you recognize, you want to figure out what height these points are, but you don't have to set it to start from zero. You can say that the relative to sea level, I want it to, the blue line is here and the bottom is this. So this is how thick it is here.
Right.
So if I were to take this to make it 50 feet, so let's say 540.
Is
All
that
right.
new? That must be relatively new, and
No.
I guess no.
No, this is always, well, been there as long as I can remember.
Right. Oh well, got used to old ways and never changed. Well, now what happens now when you go to a story, a section or an elevation in the story levels?
Okay, so we've got a section right here. Of course, there's not much to see, but if I, whoops, come on now. If I right click on, come on now, why am I not able to select this? Okay, it's just not giving me a snap there. Okay, so right click and say open with current view settings. It's taking a while to just, there we go, update there. And what does it say? It says 0 first floor here. So it's not showing the sea level stuff, right?
That's right.
Or the AHD thing. So this may be perfect, or it may be that you want the references. So if I right click on this and say edit story levels, this is actually just moving them up or down, which is like changing the story levels, like when I edited them in the dialog. That's not going to affect that, but if I right click and say section settings, this is the setting of the section marker that's passing through the building right now. We go to story levels here. We have some options here, story level symbol and text. And here's the reference level. This was added in at some point, I don't know when. I noticed it maybe within the last year. So I don't know whether it's been there for years or not, but this, I can say in this section, because we're looking at the settings for this section, I would like these to reference sea level. So now they show these numbers here. And of course, you can select all section markers and do that. You can, it's basically, each one has an option to be independently controlled.
Sure.
Okay. All right, so I do see Dave Olafs, who's having problems with getting access to Slack. You're in by a cell phone app, so you're typing in there, and it's been confusing, but it's clearer. Still murky. Okay. Well, Dave, if in the coaching program, we can go deeper. It will make more sense when it's a real project. An arbitrary thing like this, where I say, well, probably you did it this way, is not going to be the same as let's open up your project and let's fix it, right? So, okay, so Laura says thanks for sharing things, and we'll join future webinars. That's fine. Okay, good. So, Rich, does this give you some things to go on?
Yeah, I think so. I'll have to, experiment again. I guess you did it a different way by starting at 0 with the mesh, but I'm sure that the way I've done it, I can modify that so that everything will be and looking at those extra references to sea level, the settings and the dialog boxes, which, as a long-time user, sometimes you forget to really search the new dialog box and see these things. So
yeah. So the key thing here, just that I know you know this, but I'll just say it for others, is whatever you're doing. So the building, you're going to be placing on site, or you've already drawn it and you're doing the site model after. I always figure out, well, what's its top? Let's say that this is the back is the top and this is the bottom. So whatever base this is, so however low the site goes, make your blue line. And what I mean by the blue line is, what is it? If I select this, it's this line here. that is defined by this elevation. Make the blue line in general, I would recommend it to be below the lowest point. So in other words, all of these points go up. Now in this case, it actually doesn't, it seems to be working just fine. I made this higher and this lower, and it's not a problem, but you can't make this bottom one go below. Actually, what is it? I don't think you can make this bottom one go, you can take it down. Let's see, so yeah, that point. Let me just get an angle where I can do it in 3D. So I can take this, lock it up. No, interesting. Okay, now I'm locking it vertically. No, it does on some angle there. So I can take it there. No, interesting.
Don't you need the Z level symbol on the palette?
So actually, you know what? I'm on the blue line here. I want to grab this point. That's what I want. And then the Z height. I was grabbing the blue line. So here I can take this down. I can take this down lower, but I don't think I can take it down below here without it going crazy. So that's where you have a problem. So whatever the thickness is, you want to just make sure the bottom of your base is lower than whatever your lowest point of the site is. And then you can move this, you know, rather freely. And, you know, the elevation, while I can do this sort of in 3D, really what you want to do is you want to go to that point and say, what height is it here? I think this point I put, no, which one? I don't know which one it is. Let's see which. So one of them I took really low.
Well, you brought it back up again, didn't you?
Let's just see. So 3D. Oh, I brought it. Well, okay. Let's take this one down.
It was the first one.
Okay, and actually, I have it only 50 feet, so it's going to go down to like, you know, 550 or something like that when I do it. And it's, I think it would be, it might be this one here. So this is Z, yeah, 544. Okay, so you just want to type in that value there for each of these points. So my general rule of thumb is create this with the base below the lowest point, draw all of these points, and then just set all of the exterior points to their right grade, location or elevation. That gives you the sort of the prevailing grade, like it's higher in the back than it is in the front, that sort of thing. And then do your contour lines and other data points within that. And that way it actually builds it with more detail gradually and cleanly.
You might want to mention to other people, of the newbies, particularly that when you go into the section settings, that you need to then also make sure you set the heights so you can see, because you might not be able to see a section if you've raised your, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So if we have the section settings, you can say that its vertical range is infinite and it just shows everything, or you can have it limited and say it's only going between some value. So right now, this is only going to go from the base of the building up, because project 0 is the base of the building. Let's just show that, what that looks like. So this is this section, and you can see all of a sudden the section is only showing that. Now, if I go to this bottom edge, I can, I think I should be able to.
Off to the side, I think.
Oh, at the story.
Oh no, because it's.
Oh, I can do this vertical range here, upper limit, and it's not letting me grab that vertical range. Oh, well, maybe if I do it outside here, okay. I don't know why, maybe there was something else it was snapping to, but I've now said go down a little further to show more of how gray it is, or more of the building detail. And if I look at the section settings, I've just done the equivalent of saying go down to wherever it needs to be. So this is in relationship to project 0. I can also look at it to, it's interesting. So it's, it isn't giving me the option to do it in relationship to sea level or AHD here.
I just find, for others, I just find it very convenient to make sure you box that, the white area as you're seeing it there, so that when you're pulling them off onto your layouts, that's exactly all you don't have to shrink down your windows. You can say fit the frame.
Yeah, for example, here, it's going up too high for the building. Of course, I do have an extra story that I'm not even using, so I would want to remove that story. But I could also say that it's only going to go up to 18 feet or something, and now that white line goes down to here. And now when we place it on screen, it'll be cropped in. Likewise, your section marker right now is going out to the sides, way past the site. And in the section, I can go and grab this line here and say, I'd like it to be, maybe I just want it to be more in line with the building here rather than the whole site. And now if I go to the plan, you'll see that section marker has been pulled in. So you can do it on the plan. I can say, bring this in. Actually, that's the marker. Let's see if I go change the length of the line here, that I can say. So let me just take it right near the building, and we'll see the section is now cropped close to the building. So you can do it either here in this section view, using these limit lines, or you can do it on the plan, or both. All right. Any last comments or questions? We're at the 2-hour mark. So
Thanks for that, Eric. Thank you.
You're welcome. So hope all is going well down under there.
Yep, lovely weather. Yep.
Yeah.
If you're not in certain areas.
Right. I hope you have a good summer and no fires this year. So.
Yeah, and no floods for you guys, Jay.
Yeah, well, our local area got a lot of rain, but we didn't have any flooding right near us. But not too far away, there were some places that got hit pretty hard. So anyway, so let's see if there's any last comments. And don't see anything in GoToWebinar. So for any of you who want to get help from me on a regular basis, you can join the Archicad coaching program. It's on a month-to-month or a year-to-year basis. Go to archicadtraining.com/coaching, and you'll see information about that and can sign up. And for those of you who are in the coaching program who sat in on this and want to, ask some questions, we'll start in about 15 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes from now. I'll kick off the coaching program. So take care, everybody. Thanks for joining me.